Jeremy, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Linda, and thank you all for joining this morning. To the Food Focus for inviting me down to talk about our new SGS product, so Realize Winning Food Safety Culture. So today I'm going to give you kind of a brief explanation of why food safety culture is so important, and also explain how our Realize product can actually give you some food safety culture measurement. So I thought I'd begin with a nice quote from the GFSI there. So culture draws its power from the unspoken and intuitive, from simple observation and from beliefs as fundamental as this is the right thing to do and we would never do this. And raw state facts, culture lives through the human experience. And some people say that a simpler definition of food safety culture is, would a person still do the right thing if no one was watching them? So I think if we begin by kind of having a look at the journey of food safety, which in the scheme of things is actually quite a relatively new thing. And the advent of science, technology, and space travel back in the exciting 60s is recognized as a need for a more systemic way of ensuring food safety. And the Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN joined with the World Health Organization back in 1962 to create the Codex Alimentarius Commission to come up with a set of standards from criteria of contaminants, traded food commodities, and to general labeling requirements as well. Of course, I suppose the most recognizable element of the Codex is the general principles of food hygiene, which was first published way back in 1969. And this was seen to be doing quite a good job of improving food safety for quite some time, at least until the mid-90s. And I can remember back in the 90s, back at the beginning of my career, we were supplying 2 different retailers here in the UK, and we had to have 2 different HACCP plans because each retailer argued over which was the CCPs in our particular system. So whichever retailer showed up on that particular day we showed them the HACCP plan that made them happy. And of course, this needed some standardization going forward. So it was good news when we started seeing the publication of these independent food standards, so from the SQF and to the BRC. And these kind of brought together the ideas of those retailers, but they were all quite geographic and regional in mind. And of course, the ambition of these standards were to reduce the number of audits production facilities were receiving from their customers, and hopefully eliminating the different customer demands, differing requirements. So this kind of paved the way to the accredited third-party certification of these standards that we see today. And the results of these could be shared with all customers. And this level of certification will soon become the minimum requirement to even talk to a new customer. And although these standards did remove some differences, it was clear that further harmonization was needed. And the GFSI was born back in 2000 with the ambition of creating a benchmark system so a facility could be once certified and recognized everywhere. By 2009, we had a full set of different food safety standards, all benchmarked to the GFSI standards. As we know, this continued to evolve and been refined, and moving food safety requirements to meet the changes of this world, including newer issues like food fraud and also the requirements for food defense. But also back in 2009, the topic of how business culture can impact upon food safety also emerged. Now, in the UK, this was following an outbreak of E. coli 0157 back in 2005, which impacted an awful lot of school children. And the Pennington report was published in 2009, criticising the local enforcement authorities for having a soft touch. And it was hard, and it was evident that the owner of the facility had deliberately misled and lied to the inspectors involved. And this was then followed with some technical papers from Griffiths, publishing why food handlers choose not to implement known hygiene practices. And such studies indicate that while some aspects of behaviour relate to the individual, over 40% can be related to the prevailing food safety organisational culture. And of course, around the same time, Frank Yanis in the US was also publishing a food safety culture, creating a behaviour-based food safety management system, making for the creating of a behaviour-based food safety management system. In 2012, the UK Food Standards Agency issued a diagnostic toolkit for food facility inspectors, and it defined different levels of culture. And I popped this up because it's quite interesting and kind of reflects today the way that we actually view culture maturity within the business. So the ones that I identified all the way back in 2012 were scaled all the way back from the potentially the worst, the calculative non-compliers. And these are companies that intentionally breach regulations for the sake of financial gain, disputing or disregarding risk to people. Then in the middle, we kind of move up to dependent compliers, which wait for advice. They're not proactive. They may not have much knowledge about the food safety, but they will do whatever there's asked of them to do. And then what we consider the leaders right at the very top, where they've identified that safety is critical, is non-negotiable, and they have visible leadership and also demonstrate continuous improvement. So continuing on from that, momentum was continuing, and the GFSI set up a working group in 2017 to investigate food safety culture. And in 2018, it published The Culture of Food Safety, which provides the blueprint to create a positive culture. And in February 20, the GFSI announced their new benchmark 2020, which incorporated the food safety culture theme for the first time. And this was followed up by revisions of Codex Principles of Hygiene, the first for 17 years, and is also making reference to food safety culture. And of course, this year, we're also beginning to see the incorporation of food safety culture requirements into legislation around the world. So we talked about Codex and its first major update. So looking at this full review of the general principles of food hygiene from Codex, apart from the other changes to good hygiene practices and the removal of the decision tree, the most striking is the introduction of the management commitment to food safety culture. They've added a lot of detail about the expectations of food safety culture, stating it is a fundamental to the successful functioning of any food hygiene system and acknowledging the importance of human behavior. The 5 key elements here are not only senior management commitment, but the commitment of all personnel. It's important for leadership to set the direction to engage with all personnel, and noting the importance of leadership leading by example. All employees to have awareness of the importance of food hygiene, clear communication to all personnel, especially in expectations and failures, and finally to maintain sufficient resources to the system for the system to function. Now, this differs slightly from the GFSI guidance. So if we have a look here, we find that the statement on from the Global Food Safety Initiative believes that to be successful and sustainable, food safety must go beyond formal regulations and live within the culture of a company. And the GFSI paper on food safety culture really is a blueprint for developing your own food safety culture. And I highly encourage everyone to go to the GFSI website and download this paper for free. And how, as we mentioned, the GFSI have included this requirement of food safety culture into this benchmark. And it's been included under section FSM2. And essentially, it says it's been added, elements of the food safety culture are the elements of food safety management system which senior management of the company may use to drive the food safety culture within the company. And these may include, but are not limited to, so communication about food safety policy and responsibilities, training, employee feedback on food-related issues, and also performance measurements. And then when we look at regulations, so the EU are including food business operators shall establish, maintain, and provide evidence of appropriate food safety. And over in the States, we have the FDA new era of smarter food safety, which also includes the food safety culture as one of those key principles. Now, for me, looking back at kind of one of the key moments in the UK evolution, back in 2017, there was a UK House of Commons Select Committee after an uncovered TV broadcast conditions within a chicken processing plant here in the UK. And I think it's kind of important to note that this plant was actually a BRC graded AA and also through its unannounced program. And there was a number of offences actually being conducted at this particular factory. And it was clear that all the employees were clearly trained and kind of had their effectiveness of training checked. They were complying with all the BRC requirements, but it's very much the culture of the company on that day-to-day basis that allowed all of these issues to actually happen. So everyone knew what they were supposed to do, but no one was actually doing it. So when we consider the GFSI requirement for training, it says that procedures shall be established, implemented, and maintained. But who does the training, I suppose, is one of the big questions we always have to ask. If it's other employees, will they pass on the beliefs about the company to the new employees and pass on learned behaviors? So you may get an example where you spend a lot of time and money training people how to wash their hands correctly, but if one employee is sharing the information, they may tell you to wash your hands, but they never give you time to do it. Don't worry about it. Then there could be some serious concerns about the food safety culture within a business. So with this, this is the reason why we've invented our Realize winning food safety culture product, and it's to provide a measurement of that food safety culture. So when we look at the GFSI white paper, it contains 5 different dimensions of food safety culture, which is made up of 17 different elements. And our program is very much based on that GFSI structure with a few additional elements added in, and we've restructured it into 4 common pillars. And these common pillars try to kind of define core elements of what food safety culture is. So the first one is all about vision. So does the vision define the desired culture of the company? Then secondly, we follow that up with empowerment. So after we have a vision, are the employees empowered to actually deliver that vision? Then we look at the systems. So do the systems in place support the vision? And then trust. So do the employees believe and trust in that vision? So each of these pillars, we have 5 elements underneath them. So if we look at the 5 elements under the pillar of vision, we've broken this down into those sections. So again, each one of these elements is kind of like an overriding question we're trying to answer. So horizon is the company planning for the future. Values, has the company identified the values that actually needed to achieve this? Mission, has the mission been clearly defined? Direction, our direction and milestone set is very clear that if we're going to change something and improve something, we need to set markers along the road. And finally, messaging, and is the vision messaged clearly? Now, one of the powerful things of our particular program is behind each of these particular elements, we have between 3 to 5 different questions, actually digging in deeper and trying to gain a range of responses from the employees. So under the messaging section, for example, we're asking questions not only on the frequency of the delivery of messages about food safety, but we're also asking questions about where it's communicated and how it's communicated. Is it stuck up on the notice board in the hallway that nobody reads, or is it actively communicated to by members of the management? Then if we move on to the next pillar of empowerment, the 5 different sections we're looking at here were elements. First of all, consultation. So are employees actually stakeholders in the vision that's being created? Communication, and this is about updating the employees on progress made. So in the previous elements, we saw we need to set milestones to mark our improvement, and in this one, we're seeing if people have communicated about achievement of those milestones. The next 2 sections are very much related to training. So the first section, learning. Is training clear and relevant and also delivered at the right frequency? And again, we're asking multiple questions here. So how often it's actually delivered, but also what is the style of training? And I think one of the best questions in this particular one is learning enjoyable? And then finally, the second part of training, of course, is the understanding. So what is the output of the training? Do the employees actually understood what you've trained them relating to food safety? The final element under this pillar, I think, is possibly the most important part of food safety culture, and that's recognition. So our employees recognize for doing the right thing. If there's a food safety incident, are they encouraged to come forward? Do they feel safe to come forward and report that food safety incident, or do they feel that they'd be told off and picked on for highlighting food safety issues? So it's really about, is it safe for them to report a food safety incident, and also are they rewarded for highlighting food safety incidents from leaving the factory? Next, we look at the systems. So under systems, we've got another 5 elements. So target set. So are the targets set relevant to the vision? And here we're asking questions. Does the company value food safety over the volume of product that's actually produced? So where do the company's priorities lay? Is food safety sort of a #1 priority for the business? Then we look at documentation. So are procedures accessible? Are they clear? Are they written in the right languages? Are they easy to understand? Then we look into the standards of the facility. So are they maintained to the correct standard? Is the company actually investing in making sure that the fabrication of the business meets food safety requirements? Accountability. So here we're trying to understand if the employees actually understand that food safety is everyone's responsibility. And again, performance measured. So the target set at the beginning of this section, how are they actually monitored and how are they communicated? Then when we come on to the final pillar, this is trust. Now the first two again can be linked together here. So the first one, agility. So does the company adapt to evolve to the changing environment and needs? So this could be from consumer complaints made to the company. It could be learnings from product recalls, but it could also be watching the news and seeing a company that makes a very similar product to yourself having a problem and just making sure that you're not going to have the same problem within your business. So it's a self-awareness of the environment. Then the second part of that, of course, if you're finding issues, is about how you fix them. So it's course corrections. So does the company problem solve and correct the course? You know, does it actually put corrective actions in place that actually prevent the issue from reoccurring? I think the final section here, the final three, is where we differ slightly from other people's or other products. So it's all about actions. So we first of all look at leadership actions. It's very much about, do the leadership actually lead by example? And from here, we're saying that if a senior leadership or management come into the workplace, into the shop floor environment, do they actually follow the same rules we expect everyone else to follow? Do they put on their PPE correctly? Do they wash their hands correctly? And also, do they allow the personnel to actually have enough time to complete these operations? Then the second two were kind of linked. So we have peer actions and personal actions. So when we ask people questions about their personal actions, if we ask people, do you always wash your hands correctly? Do you always perform the food safety procedures you should? Most of them are always going to come back and agree and say that, yes, we always do what we're supposed to do. And this is where peer action comes in. And we ask the same questions and say, do your peers, do your fellow employees always wash their hands correctly? Do they always carry out the food safety procedures they're supposed to? And this is where it's an interesting that we get a kind of maybe perhaps a more truthful element in here in terms of they're much happier to talk about other people's actions than their own personal actions. But also included in their personal actions are questions about, are they given enough time to actually make the food safety procedures happen? Are they given enough time to wash their hands, for example? So that makes up the 4 core pillars, the 5 different elements under each pillar. So in total, there's 20 different metrics that we're actually measuring within our program. So how do we actually do this? So first of all the questions are statement-based, and they're very easy to understand. And this is where we worked extensively with psychologists to really work on the statements and kind of how this works to make sure it's accessible. We're not providing bias within any of those statements. They're very neutral to allow people to interpret them as they actually want. And we also worked very hard to make them as readable and as easy to understand as possible. Now, obviously being technical people, when we started creating this program, we're very keen to try and keep it as simple as possible, but naturally that doesn't happen because we like to start throwing in lots of technical jargon. And our occupational psychologist was looking at the questions going, what does that mean? What does that mean? That doesn't make sense. So he very much stripped out a lot of the technical jargon, although elements like CCPs still exist within the questions because hopefully every employee knows what a CCP stands for. But when we'd actually created our set of questions, we had a reading age of around a 13 to 14-year-old person. After our psychologist had also finished the reviews and showed us how to correct them and simplify them further, we're now down to a reading age of an 8 to 9-year-old. And to give an example, a UK tabloid has a reading age of a 7 to 8-year-olds. So I don't think we could make them much more simpler and easy to understand than we actually have them now. So as we said, each of those elements, or behind those 20 elements, we have between 3 to 5 different questions. But each person only answers 20 questions. And what we do is we randomize the questions from that big pool of questions behind them. And these 20 questions per person, and the fact that they're statement-based, so we're getting a very simple response to them, means the typical engagement time is only around 15 minutes to complete per person. Also, at this moment in time, we have around 25 different languages loaded up into the system, and we're constantly adding more as more countries come online and asking for it to be conducted in these areas too. So then we look at who is actually responding to this. So first of all, how many people actually have to respond on site? And this is very much dependent on the size of the site. So to get a statistically valid response out of this, we need a kind of a minimum of 25 people to respond to this assessment. So if you've got sites with around 30 people or less, virtually all of the people have to respond to the assessment. As the site sizes increase, the number of employees increase, then the percentage of the operators who have to complete it reduces. So by the time we get up to a company that's got over 500 people, we're only going to be asking for around 50% of the workforce to be responding to it. Now, we also have broken the questions up into 3 different sections, because some questions for an operator will not be relevant to a leadership and vice versa. So we've broken this down into 3 different sections. So the first section is an operator. So these are the guys that actually make magic happen on a day-to-day basis. So they are in either a production role, they've got their hands on, they're making the food or supervising the machinery that's making the food, but they're also in the ancillary support areas surrounding that. So it could be sanitation, it could be preparation areas, it could be the storage areas and logistics, the intake teams, the quality teams. So it's basically people who are making the product or supporting the production of that product based on the shop floor. Next, then we have supervisors. So these are the sort of the team leaders or middle management. So these are the guys who are managing the operators, but they're typically based upon the shop floor. So they're on the shop floor and typically managing others involved in the production of food. Then we have a final classification, leadership. And this is basically the people who lead the company. They're based in the office and they manage from that location. Then finally, how we actually deliver the product. So it's delivered digitally. And what we do is we provide a link to an assessment. So we provide 3 different links for each company. So 1 link for an operator, 1 link for a supervisor, and 1 link for leadership. As we said, each time someone clicks on this link, you get your questions provided to you, and you could have 2 different people sat side by side doing the same assessment, and they'd have completely different questions. So basically, the assessment could be completed on any internet enabled device, so from computers and laptops through to tablets and smartphones. And when we did the pilots of this around the world, we did find that in some countries, they set up a little room with a PC in there, and they sent 1 person off at a time to actually answer the questionnaire. In other countries, they put QR codes up in the staff canteen and just ask people to click on it on their mobile phone and go through to the assessment that way. So it's adaptable to the different ways you can actually get your employees to actually complete this assessment. But I think the most important thing here to stress is it's 100% anonymous. So we cannot tell who has responded to the questionnaire. All we can tell is which level of operator they're, to find out whether the operator, supervisor, or leadership, and which company they're answering the questionnaire on behalf of. So it's very stressed that we want open and honest answers back from all the employees, and we achieve this by making it 100% anonymous and also making it very statement-based and an easy-to-use thing, which means it's very intuitive to select the answer that people want to respond to. So, of course, it's great, we can do this, but what does it actually mean? What do you get out of this? So we have 3 different levels. So the first level is very site-specific, and it gives the standard report. So this comes as a PDF report that gives the main scores. So you get the overall score, you get a score for each one of those individual pillars, and then you get a score for each of those individual 20 elements as well. So all 20 elements are measured, and you get a report around that. And joined to that report is also a guidance document, an interpretation document that, again, provides explanation of what each of those elements means. And it also says if you're scoring low in one of these elements, these are the possible reasons why you're scoring low in this element. And it also gives some suggestions on how to improve performance against those issues. Then we have a premium access, which again is site specific. What this then allows is online access to the results. It gives you the same results as a standard package. However, you then have the ability to actually drill down and see the different scores achieved by the operators, the supervisors, and the leadership. And again, this is quite interesting to see the perception of the leadership people down to the perception of the operators. And again, it allows you to fine tune responses to improve your food safety culture for going forward. And then at the top, we have the diamond axis, which is really based for international companies. It allows them to benchmark between their individual sites. So if I have to sum up, what is our product? It's an assessment developed by technical food experts and occupational psychologists to measure food safety culture. It provides an insight, giving actionable intelligence that we use to continuously improve your food safety culture. And of course, another one of the benefits, it enables the organization to retain motivated teams, minimize that human error, and comply with the latest GFSI Codex and other forthcoming legislative requirements. So in conclusion, I think it's fair to say that food safety continues to evolve, and a food safety culture is really the biggest change to the GFSI standards since it was created back in 2000. So, and kind of finish as a final point from old Peter Drucker there, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Okay, that's me and my brief introduction to food safety culture history and what our product does. And thank you. And I'll hand over to Linda.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Yeah, I had a whole bunch of questions, and as you went through the presentation, so I was checking them off because it was so comprehensive. You were answering those questions as we went through the process. So thank you so much for that. Okay, everyone, it's over to you. So you've heard what Jeremy has to say. So I'm sure you've got lots of questions about this and how it impacts on your current systems, how you're going to integrate it, when you should do it. You know, how much does it cost? All of those things. So don't hold back. Please start typing your questions into the question bar so that we can ask Jeremy while we have him on the line. We also have Donna Brown-Crockhart on the line, who is the local representative for SGS within South Africa. And so Donna is responsible for managing this program and rolling it out within South Africa, because she's the certification, the business manager certification and business enhancement. So she can definitely fill in some details about how this will actually work within South Africa, when it's going to be available, and how you can ensure that you link into it for your food safety programs. Jeremy, I'm going to start with a couple while everyone's banging out their questions, but I find it interesting that people are saying that, and in your last slide, you showed food safety culture as an evolution at the end, almost the next level of food safety. I'm of the opinion that if we don't have it as a foundation, we almost shouldn't even start building a food safety house because it's bound to fail. What's your take on, you know, is it something that comes after you're BRC certified, or is it something that you should have in place before you even consider BRC certification?
That's a great question, Linda. So I think it's interesting when you listen to the GFSI that all the companies that kind of participate in the board and kind of drive that forward all say that food safety is non-negotiable. It's something that every single company should have in place, and it's the first thing that comes above anything else within the business. So I think your question's a bit of chicken and egg, which you should do first. But I think, you know, it's about the leadership of the company. If they don't embody food safety right from the very top, they don't provide the investment, they don't provide the time, yes, then ultimately those risks actually increase. And of course, food safety culture is a very much a soft topic. You know, there's no hard way to audit this in the traditional certification method. Yes. So all we can kind of do is measure this performance in kind of the objective ways that we've kind of presented in this way. But I also think, you know, one of my examples back from earlier on, the chicken processing plant, you know, and this was a top graded company, you know, unannounced and AA grade BRC. You know, this was a top certificated company. They had everything in place. They had all the training records. They verified the effectiveness of the training. But what was happening on the night shift was that people were just doing what they felt were right, and they felt that if they could recycle returns from one supermarket and send it to another supermarket, then they were increasing their efficiency and profitability. So it was very much different from what the company was saying they were doing with this AA grade to actually the reality on the ground. And I think that's where food safety culture is, that evolution, and being able to understand what the culture of food safety is within a business is incredibly important now.
Yeah, look, I think it would be interesting to go undercover in some South African businesses. I'm a little cynical. I think that those things have been going on anyway, regardless of the ratings, because I think at the end of the day, unfortunately, our food safety drives have been largely as a result of a push factor. I mean, it's been external factors that have driven us to implement food safety auditing schemes. It's been customer driven. You know, like you said, you yourself worked for retailers. It's always come from the outside. And I think that unfortunately, because of that, it can, you know, we can be doing it and ticking all the right boxes, but not really for the right reasons at the end of the day. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of those hidden things within the business that kind of demonstrate that culture. You know, we talked about kind of how, you know, this assessment can identify how the employee perceives the importance of food safety within the business. If a business just talks about how much product they're getting out the door, how fast they're producing the product, you know, how valuable that product is, how much downtime they remove, if those are all the key metrics of the business and food safety doesn't appear, then there's a serious concern. So I think now it's incorporated into the GFSI standards. Now you can see it's been incorporated into the Codex, which is going to drive that international regulation. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in Australia. We're seeing it happening in the States. Once it becomes a legislative requirement, people are going to have to change those attitudes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while before it becomes a part of South African legislation, because we just seem to be about 10 years behind the rest of the world, which is unfortunate, but maybe I'll be wrong. But do you think having it as part of an audit criteria is not reinforcing just we're ticking the boxes again?
I think because it is a soft skill, I think from the certification process, when you look at how most of the schemes have incorporated it, and you know, the BRC were the first people to incorporate it after that incident in that chicken processing plant. They kind of, because you can't actually audit it as a hard objective evidence, what they're actually insisting that people put a plan in place, they measure the performance of it, they assess where they are and continuously improve their food safety culture. Because I think they accepted that not all businesses are going to have a great food safety culture, and it's something that's got to evolve over time. So they're very much kind of forcing people to create that plan, measure and improve. So that's where we are at this moment in time. So it is a new evolution, and I think we're going to see more and more as we progress further on down the line about this topic.
Yeah. Right. Any questions from anyone else? I think there's, you know, I love the background work that's gone into it. You know, full disclosure, I'm doing food safety culture as the topic for my doctorate, so I'm really interested in how, you know, the questionnaire was put together. You know, I think that I love the pillars. I think it's, you know, some of the questions that you mentioned that you would be asking the employees. I think those are really, you know, great key questions for really getting to grips with what's going on within the company. I think it will be really interesting to see how this rolls out within South Africa, to see, you know, how people engage with it. Do you not feel that because it's being administered by an audit, a certification body, you know, like SGS, for example, do you not think that the results could be skewed by people saying, well, we better give them the right answers because it's coming from a certification body?
Like I said, that we've placed a lot of focus on, you know, making sure it's 100% anonymous and encouraging the workforce to actually answer 100% completely honestly.
Yeah.
So as part of that, we offer kind of like an informal poster information and kind of ways to communicate to your employees. This is what this assessment is about. And we also have a dedicated web page that we send people to and turn around to give them a bit more explanation of what it is and why it's important they answer it honestly. I mean, of course, you'll have people that try and manipulate it, but we actually have scoring within the algorithms. So if somebody's always scoring right at the top end and saying, we totally agree with everything in this company is absolutely brilliant, it actually starts detracting points from the business because it's possibly disingenuous results that are coming through. And of course, the algorithm has been refined through the pilots, and now it's actually rolling out. We're looking at those results and we're constantly refining that to kind of get the best results and kind of take out those false positives and also to kind of look at the extreme negatives as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so the assessment is the first step. Am I correct, Jeremy? Because then I mean, as you said, and if we don't measure, we can't manage the situation. So we have a question where someone's asking, so okay, that's all good, we're measuring it, but now what comes next? So how do we actually improve the culture? You know, is that something that you guys are working on in terms of, you know, how do I convince my senior manager that he should be committed? You know, anything like that? Because I think that's often an area where people are really, really struggling, particularly your food safety managers.
Yep. And as I said, although we kind of give the assessment sort of some measurement results to kind of tell you where that measurement is, to highlight maybe some weak points, and also more importantly where you've got some strengths. It's more important to actually share where those strengths are with the business and kind of give that great feedback to turn around and say, you know, great, you know, this is some really great results we've got coming here. But where you are identifying weaknesses, our attachment that kind of comes with the report. So first of all, it gives you those interpretation of what our pillars and elements mean. For each of the elements, it suggests if you're scoring poorly in this element, these are the potential reasons why. So based on the questions we define, they all have a direct output. So we can kind of give it's generic guidance, because obviously we can't go into full consultancy of every single assessment, but we can give guidance and say, if you're scoring poorly here, these are the suggested reasons. And if you've got suggested problems, then here are some suggested improvement actions you can actually take. And it's interesting, it's not necessarily all about just making training people in food safety. I mean, training is obviously key, and having the right style of training. You don't want to just have a procedure, you read the procedure out to someone or get them to read it and get them to sign it to say they understood it. You know, that's not engaging, that's not going to get that takeaway. But we also talk a lot about communication skills, making sure you're using the correct mix of communication skills. So, you know, some information you might want to put on notice boards, which are a bit more complex, like KPI charts. But there's other things which are best off of one-to-one or in scenarios where employees can actually give feedback to you. So you're not just talking to them, you're engaging in two-way conversation. So we've had a look at sort of the key behavioral influencers, and within that guidance, we kind of say, okay, here's some of the guidance. And maybe you need to review communication strategy. Maybe a change management course or soft skills training for some managers might be a way of doing that. Some of it's, like I said, communication, and some of it's very easy to fix.
Yes, yeah. And Jeremy, last question. Have you ever found the quality or food safety manager to be part of the problem in a food safety culture?
I sometimes perhaps, but again, I wouldn't necessarily always blame the poor quality manager or technical manager. You know, I've seen it in businesses where it's down to, well, the BRC or your food safety audit from FSSC, it's all the technical manager's problem. He doesn't get any support from any other parts of the business. You know, and you can see that when you come as an auditor, but there's nothing within those certification standards that kind of gives you that point to turn around and raise that as a particular issue. But yeah, so I think one of the worst things we can see as an auditor when we're visiting is you go to the opening meeting and it's just the senior manager's there because he's told he had to be there, or otherwise they get a non-conformance. And then you're left alone with the technical manager for the next 2 days. And then you get a gaggle of people turn up at the closing meeting. You can see that there's no interest within that business.
Yes, yeah, and I think that definitely it is definitely symptomatic. Yeah, I think sometimes we as quality managers I think we do, it does tend to attract a certain personality profile. We like things to be done certain ways, and I think when it comes to building an effective food safety management system where people engage, sometimes we have to be willing to change how something is done, not necessarily the outcome, but how something is done in order to promote engagement. And I think that's you mentioned, are the procedures written in the right way that people can engage with them? Because the SOP could itself be a stumbling block, because it's just too complicated. And that would mean a change on behalf of the team or the technical person who's actually developing the system. So I think food safety culture brings some real challenges for us as food safety professionals, and we've also got to be prepared to change. It's not just senior management, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that engagement across the entire management team that really needs to kind of be developed. But like you say, I think, the point you're making with procedures, the old rule of keeping it simple is the perfect way. If you want people to understand it and engage with it, make it readable and understandable for everyone.
Absolutely, and I like that sort of breeding age, 8-year-olds, because I think often we definitely lose sight of that. Well, it sounds really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how it's going to roll out within South Africa. I'm sure you're going to be getting lots of queries from the people that are listening, because looking at the audience that we have today, many manufacturing organizations, and I know you guys are all looking at this because it's now part of the FSSC 22,000 requirement, which I think is the audit which is largely used within South Africa. So it's going to be interesting to see the uptake. Donna, can we just have a comment from you in terms of this program is now rolling out in South Africa? Is it already available? Can people already start sort of accessing it?
Absolutely, yep. We did a few campaigns over the last week, a few weeks and a couple of months. We've had a lot of inquiry. We have our pricing structure. I think it is an incredibly reasonable pricing structure that we have for what the client gets. But yes, the sales consultants are already waiting. There's a questionnaire that clients would need to complete to enable us to quote appropriately.
Yes.
And but yeah, we're ready.
Sounds good. Well,
I was having a little giggle just now when you talked about the regulatory requirement, because we're not going to see that. But in South Africa, we know we have a self-regulatory environment that's customer driven, and we have still, unfortunately, elements of grudge purchasing. And very often, these food safety implementation management systems, et cetera, it's not always voluntary.
No.
And but yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. We've got still a lot of work to do in South Africa, although there has been a lot that's taken place since 2000 in South Africa.
Oh, for sure.
But we are still self-regulatory.
Yes, yeah. And I think, unfortunately, perhaps we haven't had as many, situations in the country that we're aware of. So, I think the Pennington, that whole situation, the Pennington report, that outbreak that Jeremy mentioned, it really rocked the UK food industry. It was it was really just terrible. And I think we've had the listeriosis outbreak. It was really terrible, but unfortunately we haven't had justice meted out as yet. It's still in court, and I know these things take a long time, but I think at the end of the day, the consequences for getting it wrong, perhaps we are not seeing that demonstrated as often as it should be. And I know that food safety issues are very topical in the UK. Restaurants have the gradings, things are in the public domain, all of those things which we don't see as much necessarily in South Africa. And I think that that's unfortunate. you know, if we could make consumers more aware of what needs to happen, I think we might see a change. But I know that that's another one of your pet subjects when it comes to, you know, restaurants and you know, consumer places where consumers are in direct contact and being served. So yeah, I think we're going to grow old in food safety. Donna, what do you say?
We are going to grow
never a dull moment. Never a dull moment. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing the information. And I'm really hoping for your sakes that you'll get lots of inquiries. And we hope to welcome you back to the South African shores as soon as your Prime Minister says it's good to go, because it will be great to meet you in person and to discuss some of these things in more detail. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, and I can't wait to return to sunny South Africa at some point.
There we go. Right, everyone. Well, thank you for being with us today. Once again, an apology for the technical issue and for starting a little bit late, but we know that it's been really good, and you've had your food safety culture full for the Friday, and so have a wonderful weekend. And if you want the recording, it will be available, so do look out for it. It'll be going live on our website next week. We'll also put it on social media, I think it might be something you want to discuss with your senior management team and your food safety team. Have a good weekend, everyone. Look after yourselves. Stay safe.